It's Christmas Day, which means that billions of people all around the world are unwrapping presents, hanging out with their families, and most importantly, arguing whether or not Die Hard is a real Christmas movie. Just to add a little fuel to the fire, I thought it might be fun to take a look at 3 of John McClane's biggest games, including Die Hard Arcade, Die Hard Trilogy, and Die Hard Trilogy 2 Viva Las Vegas. Yeah, those are definitely Die Hard games. But are any of them actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Computer and Video Games, Game Fan, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon, because this is another heart-pounding episode of Die Hard Review Crew.
Okay, cowboy, here's the odds. You've got an exploding building, a hijacked airport, an entire city under siege, and every place you go is crawling with armed terrorists. You're just a cop in the wrong place at the wrong time. Oh yeah, and you're not wearing any shoes. Prepare to die hard. Die Hard video games in one explosive package. The Die Hard Trilogy. Now available on PC, CD-ROM, Sega Saturn, and Sony PlayStation from Fox Interactive. Yippee-ki-yay.
Despite being one of the top-grossing and most influential action movies of the 1980s, you didn't see a lot of video games based off of Die Hard. Sure, there was that Die Hard game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, there was a PC Engine game that never came to the States, and then there's that version of Die Hard 2 that came to a bunch of microcomputers. But for whatever reason, the franchise was never really the hot ticket when it came to games. In 1996, Fox Interactive aimed to change all that. You see, just 1 year earlier, Die Hard with a Vengeance cleaned up at the box office, especially internationally, where it became the top-grossing movie worldwide in 1995. Clearly, this is a movie series that's just waiting to become a video game hit. But where do you start? Do you adapt the newest film since it's fresh on everybody's mind? Or maybe you go back to the very beginning and give us a really good game set in the Nakatomi Plaza. Or they could have surprised everybody by adapting Die Hard 2 since, that never really came to home consoles. As it turns out, Fox decided to do all of the above. That's right, they chose to adapt all 3 movies at once, giving us the Die Hard Trilogy. The gimmick was that each movie was represented by a different style of game. Die Hard was a third-person shooter. Die Hard 2 was one of those on-rails shooters that used a light gun. And Die Hard with a Vengeance was a driving game set in New York City. This was definitely a novel approach, giving us 3 completely different types of games to enjoy in one package. Sure, none of them felt like fully fleshed out experiences, but that didn't matter because there were 2 more games on that disc just waiting to be enjoyed. Let's see if the critics were charmed by this unique idea. Kicking things off with Electronic Gaming Monthly, they liked the game, giving it a strong average of 8.75 out of 10. Resident Fake Ninja Sushi X summed it up perfectly. Any gamer with a passion for death and destruction will fall instantly in love with Die Hard Trilogy. 3 games for the price of 1, with engines as diverse as they possibly can be while still keeping the integrity of the title intact. Title 1 has great graphics, and the control of our hero offers little resistance to make play fail. The second title is also unique as far as shooting games go by allowing players to damage or destroy everything in the level. The third disc allows you to smash mindless pedestrians as you race to clear the bombs in a cityscape. The worst part of Die Hard Trilogy is choosing the game you like best. Believe it or not, Crispin actually liked the game even more, giving it a 9 out of 10. Any one of the games included on Die Hard Trilogy would have been great on its own. but the three together make a fantastic package. This collection has something for everybody, but the third game, a driving title based on the third film, is my favorite. It has you driving through New York City searching for bombs, and the city is richly detailed. My only complaint is the sometimes frustrating control. Aiming and gun sight in the 3D shooting game isn't easy. Although it's a strong score, EGM's 8.75 out of 10 is actually on the lower end of the scale. The official Australian PlayStation magazine didn't like it as much as Sushi X, giving the game an 8 out of 10, which is basically the same score as Next Generation, giving Die Hard Trilogy a 4 out of 5. However, the lowest score comes from computer and video games, which went all the way down to a 3 out of 5. The fact that Die Hard Trilogy is 3 distinct game types and doesn't just follow the already proven Alien Trilogy formula shows that some consideration has gone into capturing the flavor of the films. Although none of the games would actually stand alone as a quality title, they're just too simple, together they make a highly entertaining package. For PlayStation games, I don't think they look that great, but on face value, this is just a highly entertaining action game. If that's what you want, you won't be disappointed. Moving back up the scale, we see the consistent GamePro given a predictably high score of 4.5 out of 5. Sega Power liked it even more, giving the trilogy a 91%, the same score as GameFan, a magazine that used to have Die Hard in its title. Mean Machine Sega went a tick higher with a 92%, but that wasn't going to be enough to catch the boastful Video Games, the ultimate gaming magazine, which gave Die Hard Trilogy a perfect 10 out of 10. The game gets a 10, not so much for any revolutionary development in gaming, but for the revolutionary idea of giving consumers 3 completely separate adventures onto one disc. Each of the 3 parts could easily stand on their own, but have instead been packed into this one outstanding game. Let's just hope that all the blood and carnage that I saw makes it into the final cut. With an overall score of 86%, the critics were impressed with Die Hard Trilogy. I mean, not enough for even one of them to consider it a Christmas game, but they loved the idea of turning each film into its own separate genre. That's both innovative and the type of thing that would have been just so much harder to pull off on a cartridge. Die Hard Trilogy was easily one of the best movie games of 1996. Have you ever played a game based on a popular movie and wondered if the developers even sat through the whole damn thing? Well, that's how I would describe Die Hard Arcade, the classic Sega beat-em-up that hit the Saturn in early 1997. That's nearly a full decade after the big screen release of the movie, which should have been more than enough time for Sega AM1 to memorize the film inside and out. Instead, it feels more like the developers watched the trailer for the movie, saw that John McClane was in a skyscraper, and just filled in the rest. What I'm saying is that this is not a very faithful movie adaptation, to the point where the plot revolves around John trying to save the president's daughter from terrorists. But just because it takes some serious liberties doesn't make it bad, and this game has managed to amass a nice cult following thanks to its goofy sense of humor and 3D brawling. But what did the critics say? Were they ready to accept this as a true Die Hard game? Once again, we start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, who is smack dab in the middle of the scale. Giving this arcade port a 7.4 out of 10, EGM liked the game, but the scores were all over the place, ranging from a 6.5 all the way up to an 8. Dan was right in the middle, giving it a 7. Die Hard Arcade has many similarities to Virtua Cop. They both brought polygons to a formerly two-dimensional genre. They both are excellent arcade-to-home translations, and they both have extremely limited replay value. Die Hard Arcade is a lot of fun to play, but you may find yourself wishing that you had rented it instead of buying it when you beat it in an hour. Crispin liked it a bit more, arguing that Die Hard Arcade is the slickest ripoff of Final Fight that he's ever seen. You get loads of moves, cool bonus rounds, screen-shaking weapons, and the ultra-sharp polygon graphics certainly don't hurt. The game is kinda easy though, especially when you rack up a few dozen credits in the deep scan minigame. The quirky enemies add personality to Die Hard Arcade too. Now, if you're looking for the lowest scores, then we're gonna need to take a quick trip over to the UK, as Computer and Video Games went all the way down to a 3 out of 5. That's right there with Edge, who couldn't muster up anything more than a 6 out of 10. As accomplished an arcade game as Die Hard Arcade might be, serious questions have to be asked of it as a Saturn release. With plenty of continues, the game can be completed by a total novice in under 20 minutes. Although the idea then is to finish it quicker in more life economic times. That kind of replay play is never as satisfying as the exploration of new areas. True, the excellent 2-player game adds a lot, but again, not as much as 20 more levels and a range of alternate routes would have done. Die Hard Arcade is another fine Sega coin-op, well converted to the Saturn. Unlike such arcade Saturn hits as Virtua Fighter and Sega Rally though, it doesn't look fully at home. For this type of game, Guardian Heroes still holds the honors. In a twist that I certainly didn't see coming, Edge's sister magazine, Next Generation, actually liked the game a bit more, giving it a 4 out of 5. GameFan went one tick higher with an 81%, while Sega Power was extra generous when they gave Die Hard Arcade an 88%. However, when it comes to the highest score, look no further than the always consistent GamePro, who yet again went with a 4.5 out of 5. Although the game is short, fans of titles like Streets of Rage will love Die Hard Arcade's familiar beat-em-up style. Rent it first to see if it'll keep your attention for more than just a weekend. You're sure to find the action hard to beat. Yeah, this is one of those games where your enjoyment almost entirely hinges on how you view the length. With even the high scores suggesting that you might want to rent the game, it was clear that this was an issue across the board. It's a fun game, but I certainly wouldn't spend a whole lot of money on it.
A hijacked airport. A city under siege. An exploding building. Get out of there. Get it in 3.
はて、いいんじゃない?
Die Hard Trilogy. PlayStation.
You have to hand it to Fox Interactive for not taking the easy way out. They could have very easily adapted one of the Die Hard games as a simple third-person shooter or a driving game, but they went the opposite direction, adapting all 3 movies in one game and then turning each installment into a different type of game. That gamble ended up working out for them, as Die Hard Trilogy was a huge hit. I mean, people still loved Die Hard, and getting 3 styles of game in one felt like they were actually getting a lot of content. The problem is, the Fox wrote themselves into a corner. They had already adapted all 3 of John McClane's adventures, and that 4th movie wasn't going to come out for another 7 years. So, what are they going to do now? As it turns out, the solution was to write a brand new adventure set in Las Vegas. All while confusingly slapping the number 2 at the end of the name Die Hard Trilogy. I mean, aside from John McClane, this really doesn't have anything to do with the movie trilogy. But I suppose in this case, what they're doing is they're trying to remind players that they're getting 3 games in one. Unlike the first game, where each movie played out as either a third-person shooter, an on-rails light gun game, or a reckless driving simulator, here there's only one story, and the 3 genres are incorporated throughout. Does that work? Oh man, I can't wait to see what the critics said. Now, when it comes to Electronic Gaming Monthly, they were not as impressed with the whole 3 genre gimmick this time around. Shu gave the game a 6.5 out of 10, and summed it up this way. The original Die Hard Trilogy was quite, original for its time. Now that the thrill of 3 games in one is old news, the arrival of Die Hard Trilogy 2 is no big deal. It's a bigger no big deal when you actually play it. Some parts are frustrating because of the poor level designs. Some parts are plain no fun because of the repetitive gameplay. Die Hard Trilogy 2 is a nice distraction, but nothing to yell Yippee-ki-yay over. Dean liked it even less, giving it a 5.5 and arguing that while it can't touch Siphon Filter, Die Hard Trilogy 2 is not the worst he's played. If anything, it tries to do a bit too much. I could have lived without the clunky, almost laughable driving portions. The light gun stuff is okay, but again, why? Sadly, much of the game is given to you. You can see through walls and enemies line up to get shot. Still, I like Die Hard Trilogy 2 to a point, but I can't recommend it unless you're really into these genres. EGM gave Die Hard Trilogy 2 an average score of 6.1 out of 10. Once again, EGM was right there in the middle of the scores. Going down the scale, we see Insight giving the sequel a very middle-of-the-road score of 3 out of 5. Next Generation went even lower, giving it a 2 out of 5. The action sequences are plagued by sorting errors so bad as to be almost comical. Every single wall becomes semi-transparent when approached, making the levels impossible to navigate. The driving mode is simply forgettable with outdated graphics and no physics engine to speak of. The overall result is a game that amuses for an hour or two, but for all the wrong reasons. Bottom line, 3 bad games don't add up to one good one. Now, for what it's worth, there were magazines that actually liked Die Hard Trilogy 2. For the most part. For example, PSM gave the sequel a so-so 3.5 out of 5, which is the exact same score that GamePro gave the game. As it turns out, the magazine formerly known as Die Hard Game Fan ended up giving this Die Hard game the highest score. But don't immediately accuse them of having a bias, because the high score we're talking about is actually a 72%. Not exactly a glowing endorsement. Ego gave the game a 66%, explaining that they love Die Hard as a movie, but not as a game. The 3-game engine doesn't really work since none of them is much fun to play or pretty to look at. In fact, the jerky movement of the camera had my head spinning. With Siphon Filter 2 available this month also, it's best to overlook the tempting Die Hard license and go with Gabriel Logan if you want a fix of gunslinging action. Everything is better in Siphon Filter 2. Graphics, gameplay, control. ECM agreed, giving this Vegas-themed sequel a 70%. Not one for the first Die Hard trilogy, I approached the second with much hesitation, and wasn't surprised to find that this one didn't really rock my world either. Sure, it's a great series of movies, and the 3-engine gameplay is more varied and integrated this time. But I'm just not into any single one of these modes. I think this might just fall into the milking it category. We all know how much I hate strawberry milk. With an overall score of just 62%, Die Hard Trilogy 2 is down from the 86% we saw from the first game. This is a great example of how quickly trends were changing in the late 1990s. What was innovative in 1996 is now passé just a few years later. And you know who I blame for that? Santa Claus. Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Give me a Yippee-ki-yay.
Yippee-ki-yay. Yippee-ki-yay.
Next. Can you take a bullet?
Oh!
You're being attacked.
Are you man enough to be John McClane? Try action mode, extreme driving, and first-person sharpshooter in Die Hard Trilogy 2. Rated M for mature.
Freeze!
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you'll be happy to know that we have a whole playlist full of episodes just like this one. I say give it a binge, assuming that you can break free of the family this holiday season. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Christmas game? I'm going to let you decide what that means. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're not done with 2024 yet, so expect some recap episodes and a look back at the last 12 months of the Nintendo Switch Online. We're going to see if Nintendo did better or worse than last year, and then we're going to predict what's in store for 2025. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,